Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to Off the Floor. That's our Discord server, $2.99 per month. That gives you access to everything. You can bypass the Apple upcharge. All you got to do is go and use the link that is here in our description. You get access to 11 different channels when you do that. Again, it's called Off the Floor. Get off of Twitter for sure. The other apps, this is still the best place that you want to go. So check it out. That's our Discord server, $2.99 per month. Also, check out the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. That includes Underdog, special sponsor of this particular episode. You can find them at the App Store. Download them now. Use the code 5, and you get up to $1,000 in free play. I think Tyler Hero is going to keep scoring over 22.5 points a game. You can play that here. Terry Rozier, we're going to talk about him today as well. Will he finally get his scoring average up? You can play it at Underdog. Join over 5 million fans that are already playing on Underdog with their pick'em game. You can win money by making picks on your favorite players. Here's the thing, though. You must be at least 18, 19 in Alabama or Nebraska, 19 in Colorado for some games, 21 or over in Massachusetts or Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. If you're concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. And now, today's episode.
Down the Biscayne. Yeah. 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Just like Buck said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat, we trust.
You sound scared.
It's about have the guts, we're here to bring the heat. Y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick at 5 Reasons Sports. We got Greg Sylvander. You can follow him at Greg Sylvander. Make sure to check recent episodes. We've been sharing the load here a little bit, doing a little bit of load management as the Heat take their Shakira's hip line break, where we thought that they were going to, they thought Shakira was going to take over the arena this week. She ended up postponing her concerts, and they're going to be at the stadium next year, and it just left the Heat with these empty dates. So we've had 5 days without games. Make sure you check out the episode that I did with Adele and Eternal on the Ware draft pick. Now that Connect and I'm sorry, who's the one that's going off and they're losing all the games?
Jared McCain
with Philadelphia. Yeah, I mean, look, he's the greatest player ever, but like they've lost 7 out of 8, 8 out of 9. So anyway, we got into that. Alex and I did an episode on ESPN's list of the top trios in the league, and they had a trio that's gone. And again, I know Tyler wasn't there for the finals run, but a trio that has been on the roster together for 3 conference finals runs and 2 finals runs. They had them 20th in the league behind San Antonio's trio, among other things. So we got into that and also looked at the dynamic between the 3 of them because the view here is, though, as much as that was ridiculous, they're not playing that well together still. Okay. They have a net rating together, the 3 of them, of -12. So there are still things that they need to work out there. And then Brady and I did an episode about the starting lineup and whether or not it sticks. And Greg and I will touch on some of that today, but we're going to touch on 2 other things instead. First thing is I just want to set the table here because we haven't really done this. The Heat are in another of these pockets of the schedule where they need to rack up wins because it's followed by a section of the schedule. And we did this at the beginning of the season. We talked about their first 5 or 6 games. They needed to get some wins. They only got 2 out of the 6. And then they went out on the they got 3 out of the 6, right? And then they went on the swing, and that included the loss to Sacramento. They went on that West Coast swing that ended up in Indiana. They went 2-4 on that overall trip, and then again got a win right before the break against Philadelphia. And they're in another of those stretches now where they've got to get wins because the bad teams are all in one pocket, and then they're followed by good teams. So here's what we're looking at. You've got the Mavericks on Sunday. Obviously, that's a finals team from last year, Greg. It's not a bad team, but it doesn't appear they're going to have Luka. Tuesday,
should be a
play
win.
The Bucks. It's got to be a win, right? Tuesday, you've got the Bucks, and you've got Giannis and Dame, but again, the Bucks are under 500. You got to get that one. That's an in-season tournament game, too. Then you go to Charlotte. The Hornets are improved. Brandon Miller, LaMelo Ball. But again, that's one of those games that you need to get. So you're going to Charlotte. That's next Wednesday. Then you get the Raptors at home. Bad team. Raptors on the road. So I'm looking at those 5 games. And before we get to the other topic today, which is Terry Rozier, like you have to get 4 of those 5 because here's the schedule after that, Greg. At Boston, Lakers at home, Suns at home, Cavs at home, Thunder at home, Magic on the road. So you're talking about the NBA champions, then a team with LeBron and AD that's playing pretty well right now, the Suns who always give you problems and obviously have Durant and Booker, the Cavs who to this point have lost once, the Thunder who may be the most talented team in the league, okay, and then you finish with the Magic, and they don't have Paolo, but they played well defensively anyway, and they stifled you on opening night.
Well, and not only do you finish with the Magic, I'm going to extend the schedule out 2 more games. You play Brooklyn, and then you go back and play the Magic again in Orlando. So you get Orlando twice in a stretch. So even if you think, oh, let's try to get one of those, you know how hard it's going to be to get both? I think that this is a stretch that very much is going to tell us the direction of this season because you're right. Like they have to capitalize on the front end of this. 4-1 for sure would be the goal so that as they go, even this stretch at home, like you have to maybe be competitive against the Lakers and try to get that victory, or Phoenix, as competitive as they were on the road against them, maybe they can try to get that one at home. But then, Cleveland, Oklahoma City, it's going to be tough, and they have to figure out a way for the lineup combinations to work. So there's a lot to move through here, but they have to get these next games, any of these against these sub 500 teams. You kind of have to include Milwaukee in that because they have not lived up to expectations. They got to get these up front because the back end has a chance to be rocky. And then you end up going into the new year wondering where you are. The only thing that's saving their ass is that the East is so forgiving right now. They are in the 5th seed and they're a game under 500.
Exactly. But again, you don't want to let teams like Milwaukee get off the mat. And some of these other teams that have struggled a bit. I mean, Orlando has not struggled as much as people expected because Franz is playing at a really high level. And that's overcome Paolo's absence, but you're still behind them. You really shouldn't be with Paolo being out for the past, 2-3 weeks. And, we talk about Cleveland's gone, right? You're not catching them at this point. Philadelphia has buried itself. So that's a team we thought would be ahead of them. So you have to stay ahead of teams like the Bucks, right? And you can't allow a team like Charlotte to start to jump up here either because there is some young talent on that team. And that's, again, you look at Chicago, Atlanta, these are teams that really Miami should be ahead of comfortably, and they're not. I think you have to go 4-1 in this 5-game stretch. That would put you at 10-8 entering the next stretch, and then maybe you can survive that where you get out of that no worse than 500. This is kind of where the Heat are going to be. They're going to be bouncing around 500 until they can find a stretch of games and continuity where they can try to separate themselves, or they can kid themselves into the fact that they're going to separate themselves at some point. And that was one of the frustrations when the schedule came out. We talked about that maybe they would be bouncing around 500, beat a couple of decent teams, lose to most of the good teams. The East is not really so good, although it's worse than it's been. Windhorse actually had a number today that this is the most dominant the West has been against the East since 1950.
Unbelievable.
And just to put that into some kind of context, it's been 26 of the last 28 years that the 8th seed in the West has finished with a better record than the 8th seed in the East. So it's not like the West has not been dominating all along. I get all my double negatives. They have been, and yet this is the most dominant that the West has been. So the East have been gifted this garbage conference, really with the exception of the Cavs and the Celtics. And they have not found a way to capitalize on it yet. And I'm afraid, again, they're going to talk themselves into this team is good enough to compete. But if they come out of this stretch under 500, I don't know how they can tell themselves that. Okay, let's get to the next part of this, which is the Terry Rozier situation, because you and I have not had a chance to talk about this on a podcast, and we've done everything else. He's not played well, okay? Let's go back, because I don't want there to be revisionist history for either of us in this case. We were both in favor of that trade, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, I reported the deal with excitement. I thought that it was going to be a move that I kind of, just to sneak this in here, I thought it was a precursor to other moves on the roster that have never happened, and that's fine. And I have issues with that too. We could talk about that on a different show, but I thought Terry was going to provide just enough scoring boost, just enough playmaking to kind of be that other guy that doesn't have to be a focal point, but just a guy you can rely upon to get buckets. And it initially looked like it could work. Like, not necessarily the pairing in the backcourt. I think that's always looked a little suspect, but I thought Terry Rozier as an individual last season, you saw flashes and glimpses of what you would expect from him. I mean, I'll go back to that game at Cleveland last year. He was just awesome. And so there, you could see how that would work. And to me, this is just careening toward him having to lead a second unit and getting the opportunity to have the ball in his hands, be scary Terry like he was in Charlotte, and you have to hope for the best, because this is a really unique balance for the coaching staff, because you can't lose your season in the next 4 weeks with the way that the schedule goes, but you also can't lose this player for the balance of the season in terms of maximizing him with your other players and figuring out a role that works. Like, you can't all of a sudden be in, late January and you still haven't found a role that works for a player. Like, you're starting to run out of time, in my view. So this is really valuable moments. The fact that they're going to have almost everybody back on Sunday, it appears, I think is another important point to them finally getting to the bottom of what's going to work and what doesn't, and what changes should be made. But the number one change that should be made, and I know you and Brady talked about the starting lineup, I think Terry has to lead the bench unit. And I think that's the way y'all lean as well, right?
It is. I think at this point I would lean into the starting lineup as Spoelstra constructed it in the last game. It's your core four from this build with Duncan and Tyler and Bam and Jimmy. And you need Haywood out there. And one of the reasons you need Haywood out there is, I went through these numbers with Alex. When you don't have Haywood in there, this team is terrible defensively. Yeah. And one of the reasons it's terrible defensively is the metrics with Jimmy are terrible. Every three-man combination you go through, when you sub in Haywood for Butler, you subtract like 10 to 15 in terms of their defensive rating. And so we all talk about the backcourt. It's not just the backcourt. They literally have 2+ defenders on this team right now. They do. Bam and Haywood. Okay. Really, and somehow that in Spoelstra has been enough for them to be 11th in the league in that defensive rating. But a lot of that, as Alex pointed out, they went from 19th to 11th after the one game against Philly. So it's not like this has been a sustained thing. But they need Haywood in the starting lineup with that group. And everybody's going to say, well, they're small again. But you're a little bit bigger in the backcourt by having Duncan. And Duncan and Tyler have learned how to play off each other. And they both improved defensively enough. And this is the other part. It's not like you're getting great defense from Rozier. So to me, you go with your best offensive players. And right now, Duncan Robinson is a better offensive player for this team and what they need. And Bam's comfort level, which they have to get him going at some point here too, than Rozier is. And I'll get to the bench here in a second and what that can look like with Rozier. But what if I was to tell you this? And this is the concern here. And again, I was in favor of the trade. I thought it was a good hedge move. You weren't going all in, but you were giving that team kind of a chance, provided that Jimmy and Tyler stayed healthy, which in Jimmy's case did not happen. And at the same time, you're giving up 1 first-round pick, not 2, which you might have been looking at for Murray or others, DeJounte Murray or others that they were looking at. Yeah. And we talked about them needing rim pressure. Now, the problem is Rozier provides some rim pressure, but he doesn't finish at the rim at a high rate. So it's kind of like he gets you there, but he doesn't get you over the top. And then we also talked about the concerns about him and Tyler playing together, not just defensively, but offensively. I thought their flow looked okay offensively, but now the thing is Tyler has accepted his role so well and played so well that he's passed Terry to such a degree at this point that I actually think Terry's presence on the floor with him is not helpful. And I think it's better to have the ball, Tyler on and off the ball, playing with Duncan creating these actions, this space, and again, creating these actions with Bam. And
Terry's not good standing in the corner, Ethan.
That's the thing. I mean, Duncan is going to move, and I prefer to have that and have Haywood standing in the corner or have Bam standing in the corner at times, because I've talked about how I would rather him shooting threes from the corner where there are no decisions to be made and he just shoots it, as opposed to at the top where he's looked reluctant to shoot it and it's gummed up the offense. Okay, so I'm in favor of them staying with starting lineup, and I want to get to the bench in a second. But here's my concern about Rozier, okay? If I was to tell you he's basically at his career averages right now, what would you say?
I would say that career averages can be deceiving because of early seasons where you don't accumulate a lot of stats. But also, I would say that Terry, I think, is always going to be a player that's going to be able to get numbers. It's just about, is it within the formula of winning basketball or not?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, like, you can't hide from the fact that in Charlotte, some of the looter and the riot stuff comes up. I think he has the skill, but fitting it in here, especially when you see his confidence level, and maybe that was due to the injury. Maybe we should give him the benefit of the doubt if he's been actually chronically dealing with an injury since the start of the year and he's just kind of kept quiet about it and missed time and now feels good enough to be back. Maybe we'll see a different decisiveness from him that could change the trajectory of where he would go. But even if he plays, like, here's the thing, Ethan, that's funny is, like, at this point, with the way Tyler's playing and with what you need from Duncan to potentially activate Bam, even if Terry plays as well as you would have projected him to come here and play from Charlotte, I still think he has to come off the bench. I don't see any scenario where it works, even if he regains Charlotte form, for him to really be a viable option in the starting lineup.
I'm with you, and I want to get back to the idea of his career averages here in a second, but here's what's concerning about that. We talked all last season about how they needed a jolt of some kind, right? And now for Spo to get things right with this group, he's literally got to go back to that 4. Like, for all the players that they've added, okay, and they've added players like these. This is the only 4 who've been here for all 6 years of this build. That's why Duncan got irritated with me when I said you're still here. He's the second longest tenured Heat player, okay, behind Bam. Then Tyler right after Duncan. Not right after Duncan. Then Tyler was drafted 2019. Jimmy right after Tyler, right? Because Jimmy came in after Tyler was drafted. Those are the 4 that are still here. Haywood is one of their longest tenured now. Like, he knows that this starting lineup had only played 5 minutes together before the other night, but Haywood knows their core tenants, okay, and he's their core developmental project right now on the roster, other than Duncan, who preceded him. Okay, because Strus is gone, as we know, and the Laker fans are not happy about. Vincent's gone, and Caleb Martin is gone, much probably to Caleb's chagrin with the way things are working out in Philadelphia. The reality is Haywood is the guy that they kept, okay? And it looks, they needed to. Look at what would they do right now if they had let Haywood walk. Some of the stuff that we were talking about in the offseason, like Haywood,
they're 2 defenders short with Highsmith. Could you imagine if they didn't have him?
Right, like, and it's not, again, DeLon didn't re-sign, and they had some interest there, and they needed Haywood, so it's a good thing he signed at a bargain price, okay, for what he provides for them, and he's a good teammate and all the rest of it. He doesn't complain about anything. He does whatever it is they ask him to do, okay. But here's the issue with it. You've literally had to go back. I mean, you've added Hawkins, you've added Jokic, you've added Ware, right? You've this free agency this time, low budget free agent Burks, who's been good and probably should be playing more. You added Jay Rich as a minimum guy. And we are right back where we were, where it's Duncan, Tyler, Jimmy, and Bam. And it's just about who can unlock them in the best possible way. And right now you need Haywood's defense. So that's who it is. I think if we had talked about best case scenario before the season, we'd say Hawkins was playing at such a high level that you had to force him into the starting lineup. Well, because of the injuries, that hasn't really happened yet. Okay, so we are right back where we're at. Duncan, not only is he still here, but he's integral to everything that they're doing still. Not only is Haywood still here, but he's integral on the defensive end to everything they're doing. Duncan more on the offensive end, obviously. But my thing on this before we get to the bench is when I say Terry is literally his career averages, and I know early on in Boston he didn't play the big minutes and he played bigger minutes in Charlotte. He won more early, etc. For his career, Terry Rozier averages 14 points, 4 rebounds, and 3.6 assists, rounded up to 4. Yeah. This year, Terry Rozier is averaging 13 points, 4 rebounds, 3.7 assists, rounded up to 4. For his career, Terry Rozier shoots 42%. He's at 38 this year. For his career, he shoots 36.6% from 3. This year, he's 33.3. His free throw shooting has gone up this year. It doesn't get to the line a lot, from 82.8 to 88.5. he is essentially, with a small dip in shooting, he's essentially doing what he's done over the course of his career.
Yeah.
And so I just asked this question, and you can answer it on the other side as we get into Terry's future and we also talk about the bench. Is this all he is? Is this all he is? Is what we saw in Charlotte, like you said, a blip because the looter and the riot concept, which comes up all the time, where somebody needed to direct the offense, somebody needed to score. LaMelo was out a lot. Terry's efficiency numbers were not terrible in that context, but maybe it's just we were projecting him to translate that here when the reality is that's not really the player he is in this context with this type of team. Okay, on the other side of this, we will get into the bench and that. Before we do, want to mention another of our great sponsors, Water Cleanup of Florida. You can find them at WCUFL.com, and that's WCUFL.com. You can find them in Boca Raton. They service the entire Tri-County area. They also help out in other parts of the state, Central Florida, West Florida, just good people. Michael, Robert, and his team, they got so many 5-star reviews on Google, I can't even keep track of them anymore. If they can't do the job, they will let you know. They're not trying to just take your money like another contractor. This is your one-stop water and mold cleanup shop. At your first sign of a leak, reach out to them. Don't wait until it gets worse, but they will do everything for you once it does get worse as well. So reach out. And Michael, Robert, his whole team. We're in a fantasy basketball league with Michael as well. Actually, we're 2-2 right now, so maybe we need to do some reevaluation. WCUFL.com. If you've got the schmutz,
they got the guts.
Is this what Terry is? I mean, is this essentially if he's a starter, he's kind of a bottom 5 starter in the league as a bench player. Maybe he could give you Lou Williams-like production on occasion.
That's a tough pill to swallow because I think then we are forced to, you and I are forced to schedule a subsequent podcast where we talk about the trades that you most regret in Heat history, because if this is really all that you get from him, it's reminiscent of kind of like it's completely different circumstances, but it reminds me a little bit of when you gave up a pick to get Ricky Davis and it just didn't work out because what he did, and the mind frames are different. I'm not trying to compare them as players. I'm talking about the situation being you thought maybe he could give you a different look to save a group, and it didn't save the group. It actually completely everything.
That was 07, right? That's after they traded Antoine, right?
Yeah, Walker, and they got Mark Blunt, and they got Ricky Davis. Right. And I believe
that was a disastrous trade. Yeah, that was a bad trade. And sometimes they look. Here's the thing on some of their trades, and we should do a trade podcast at some point. Okay, some of their trades are not really trades, right? Like LeBron and Bosch were not really trades; they were forced to be trades by the rules at the time. You had to give the extra picks, and of course they changed the rules afterwards. And right, it's all bullshit. And the Heat got screwed with that because they had to give out the 6-year contracts with the 4th-year option after the 4th year, and they had to give up 4 first-round picks, 2 to Toronto, 2 to Cleveland. That never would happen now. And again, they got screwed, but they got their 2 titles and they got their 4 finals, and you would take that every single time, and they would take that every single time. Okay, there are other trades that they've made to try to salvage situations, like going way back. Okay, Ike Austin was a player that they would have loved to have kept. And for those who don't remember, he was the backup behind Zoe. This was one of their finds. Okay. They got him in shape. He played great. He was a fan favorite, right?
Yeah.
But they couldn't keep him financially. I don't remember what the reason was.
Just to exemplify just a bit more for all the young folks there, like what the hell are they talking about? Ike Austin came in and started for Alonzo for an extended stretch because I think he had a calf injury or something like that. I can't remember exactly. Don't quote me on the injury, but maybe he fractured his face. Anyway, and Ike Austin averaged like 18 and 9 rebounds, like for a long extended stretch. So you saw that he could be a starter level player, and they could have used him in a bruising Eastern Conference, but they knew they couldn't keep him, and they flipped him for Brent Barry, and that was one that you regret.
Well, it was one they regret because Brent just never wanted to be here around Pat. It's not because Brent wasn't a good player. He was a good player in a variety of different places, but they just did not click in any way, and so it didn't work out. And I if I recall, around that same time, and one of the Heat historians who listens to this pod, particularly inside the organization, can correct me if they like, but I think they didn't flip Eric Murdoch, right? Like they had an opportunity to, but they didn't. And he was one of their backup point guards during the Hardaway years, but they had, was it Murdoch, Porter, Crotty, and then AC. And they didn't flip Murdoch, and so they did flip, I think, Austin the year after, or something around those times. But anyway, they've had to make decisions on when to flip a guy, when not to flip a guy. And sometimes they've made mistakes when they've just had to flip somebody, okay? And so, and sometimes there's the trades you don't make that are better. Now, in this case, okay, and this is where both you and I may need to mea culpa on this, ultimately, if the Rozier thing doesn't work out or they don't recoup value for him, okay, is that we were both in favor of them flipping the Lowry contract.
Yes.
In fact, we made it a referendum on whether or not they cared. Yeah. A lot of fans did. You in particular. I mean, we both did.
I was really loud about it. I wanted them to fill that with a player who would contribute more, and I honestly thought Terry could be that guy. So I'm taking all of that at I am not hiding from the fact that I was 100% in on it. I understood the financial implications. I understood the draft pick. I thought it was the right move, and so far it has not proven to be.
Right, and I'm not gonna back away from it either. I thought it was the right move too. I wasn't maybe quite as strong about the idea if they don't use it, it shows. But I was definitely in favor of the move, and I think part of the reason that I was in favor of the move was one of the reasons you were, is that we were just kind of sick of watching Kyle play. I mean, I think, and it wasn't just tired of watching him play and not take a shot for 22 minutes. But it was also because of the stuff that was going on behind the scenes, and he was clearly not happy to be here and really wasn't happy from moment one. And it just sort of deteriorated where it just seemed like, okay, what's Kyle going to say to the media? Is this affecting Jimmy? Like, there were a whole bunch of other things that were going on behind the scenes that were like, okay, they can go get a player who has played well and has had good efficiency, even if it's been in a losing situation, who gives them quickness, who gives them the ability to get to the basket more often, who can maybe throw a lob to Bam. Okay, and maybe isn't just going to look so disinterested like Lowry looked, where all Kyle was doing at the end was pointing. And let's not say Kyle's been a great player since. He hasn't, okay? He's playing in Philadelphia basically because they're out of bodies, all right? That's the primary reason he's playing. I understand the little things he brings to the game, but this is nowhere near the player that the Heat thought they were getting a few years ago, and he would not have been any better for them this year. So this is not a question of I regret them trading Kyle Lowry. And even the first-round pick, like I said, you want the asset. You need more than that to be able to get the kind of players we're talking about for the Heat. So it certainly hurts them, but it's not the only thing that has sabotaged a move like that for them. But you can't give up a first-round pick and get somebody who does not make you better. Yeah. And that's where we're at with this right now. And that's why as I pivot to the bench, he has an opportunity. If you're going to give him, say, Jaquez, who's this bench going to be? It's him, Jaquez, Love, Jovic, and Burks. That's what I would.
Yeah, basically. And I think that on some nights he may not go quite that deep, although lately he's been doing that. But yeah,
he's going to play Jay Rich ahead of Burks, though, isn't he? I mean, Jay Rich and Rozier together is not. And then you got Larson waiting in the wings, and people want Ware to play. But as I said on the podcast I did with Eternal and Adele, the fact that now you don't have Love or Jovic starting makes it less likely for Ware to play because those two guys are going to play off the bench.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so you're not playing Ware with Love and Jovic. So to me,
this completely buried
further out, right? And Larson probably as well. I would play Burks because of how good to me, he was a good acquisition. He's looked good to me every time he's played. But you can't play Jay Rich and Rozier together, right? I don't think that works.
No, but I could see Spo trying it or just staggering enough. But I think they need to give Terry. They owe it to themselves, particularly giving up this 2025 draft capital with as well as they've drafted, to figure out a role for him and give him another shot with extended minutes. So I don't think just shrinking Terry's minutes down to 19 a game is the move. I think you need to still give him, 25 plus minutes and see how it rolls out initially. And whereas Josh, I think you could sprinkle in to a much lesser extent. And so when you say them two next to each other, it sounds a lot worse than if they only, share the floor for 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, Brady thinks that we're going to see Jimmy anchor the unit with Rozier. Which I think is possible because this idea again of when we considered Rozier one of their four, of having three off the floor at the same time, I don't like that either. I feel like this. He has to stagger it, so he's got two guys anchoring that second unit. He seems to want to split Bam and Jimmy at times, which is fine. Okay, but he can't have them both off the floor for a ton of minutes, even if Jimmy's not defending at a high level right now. And so I think that you may see Jimmy in there with Terry at times. Let me ask you these two questions before we close, okay? Well, three questions. Question one, we'll do these rapid fire, Greg. Mm-hmm. How many minutes a game would you play Terry and Tyler together if Terry's coming off the bench?
I think a combined 19 to 21 minutes is worth a shot.
You mean 19 to 20 minutes with them both on the floor?
Yeah.
I would go under.
Really?
I would go under. To me, if you're putting Terry on the bench, you're putting Terry on the bench in part to clear him from Tyler.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe I'm overthinking it a little bit, just trying to figure out the rotations and how they use all the players and they equal out the minutes. I would think that there'd be some duplication, like they'd both be on the floor just by virtue of the fact that there's only enough minutes in the game. But you could be right that they need to go a little bit lower. When you talk about anchoring the second unit, I just want to sneak this in here with Jimmy and Terry. There's a conversation to be had about, like, you talk about career averages and where people look like. Look at Jimmy Butler's season compared to his career averages, and he's not going in the right direction there either. So you're really sending two guys who, while Jimmy has had far more moments and obviously looked great against Philadelphia, he also has some stuff to do. I mean, he's shooting in the sub-20s from three. I mean, it's nasty.
And last year he shot a surprising low 40s from three. He's playing Dallas on Sunday, which, with or without Luka, has been a team that's given him a lot of problems, along with Denver. So I'm curious to see the way he played against Philadelphia carries over. Two more quick questions here. If Terry doesn't start, how much do you see him finishing?
He won't finish unless he's hot.
Okay.
Kind of like Eddie House. Remember Eddie House?
Well, I know he would leave him in for that. But so do you see Tyler and Duncan consistently closing games?
I think so. I think we're trending in that direction. Unless Jaquez comes back and is so healthy that he, kind of interjects himself there. I think that they're Spo's going to lean into to the core four that we talked about. I think that is basically they're figuring out what this team is made of, and that's going to be the group that kind of tells the tale. Those four guys.
All right, and final one here, and we'll both take a crack at this. Terry goes to the bench. What level does he have to play at to justify that trade?
The team has to win. That, he can actually not play so great, and if the team figures out ways to win, people will figure out a way to get over it. But ultimately, this comes down to, for me, keeping the ball moving, but also the efficiency has to improve. It doesn't have to be great, because I don't know if we're expecting that from Terry is the move, but it has to improve. And so, that's what I'm looking for from Terry, to come back and be a more efficient, confident player, because he clearly was thinking too much before he got hurt.
Yeah, no doubt. It's crazy because Terry came out of camp talking about how good he felt, and this foot injury kind of came out of nowhere. Just sort of like the neck injury did last year. So, again, he's got to be healthy, but he's got to be confident, and they got to find the right role for him. And Spo having 5 days, it seems pretty clear right now. I would be really surprised if Sunday it's back to Rozier and Hero in the starting lineup. But I think there's going to be some groans on that. I just don't think I just don't think you can keep – this is something we were concerned about before the season, and now we've seen it, and it ain't Tyler's fault. So that's Tyler is immune from criticism for a while, right? Like we've given him enough over the past few years. There's nothing negative to say about it.
Took his house off the market. He's staying home.
That's a little bit of news there too. So we'll see. But there's really nothing to be critical about with him and the way he's played. But they're going to need some other guys to kind of find their roles, and maybe Rozier and Jaquez can find some chemistry off the bench. But I think Rozier and Jovic, there's possibilities there. There are guys he can play with on this team, and he can make better, and they can make him better. But the idea of just sticking those four that we talked about before the season in the starting lineup, they need Duncan to oil this thing offensively, and they need Haywood in there defensively to clean things up, because otherwise I don't think they have much of a chance with the schedule that they got coming up. All right, thanks to Greg. Check out the other episodes here on the feed. We'll be back on Sunday. I think, Greg, you and I are going to host that Sunday pod.
That's
correct. We'll have Alex.
Alex Major is on the schedule, but we can talk about whether we actually.
Well, we got Major and Adele on the schedule, so we'll eliminate one or the other. I know people want us to eliminate Major because they lose every time he's on the schedule. So I'll have a conversation with both of them. We'll figure it out. All right. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.